A pleasant good morning, everyone, and you're joining us today from the St. Lucia room at the Marriott Hotel. My name is Natasha Gray Brooks, and I am the chairperson for today's proceedings, as we are having a joint press conference by the leaders of the People's Action Movement and the Concerned Citizens Movement, One Movement. I want to say a pleasant good morning again to all those who are listening via our radio stations and our media partners for today are ZIZ, Freedom FM, Von Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City Walk. And I also want to thank those who are listening via the social media platforms. As I said, we're here today for a joint press conference, and we are very grateful for your time and your attention. We want to thank those who are visiting with us, who are here for our recently concluded music festival. We want to thank those who put on a great show, not just for those here in the Federation, but for those that traveled from very far. And so once again, we thank you. As we start today's proceedings, I would wish to say that it's always good for us as partners of one movement to come together and inform the nation. And I am quite certain that many of you are always eager to hear from us. And so, as we start today's proceedings, I would call on none other than the political leader of the People's Action Movement, who's here at the head table with me, along with Honorable Mark Brantley. I would call on him to give a brief presentation. But before I come, I want to acknowledge the presence of my colleagues, the Honorable Lindsay Fitzpatrick Grant, the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, the Honorable Eric Evelyn, Mr. Chesley Hamilton, and Mr. Lincoln David Pell. And so I bring to you, to the microphone, the Honorable Sean Kenneth Richards to make his presentation.
Thank you, Chairperson Natasha Shani Gray Brooks, our candidate for East Bastille. I also wish to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Mark Brantley, Premier of Nevis, and Mrs. Brantley, the Honorable Lindsay Grant, the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, the Honorable Eric Evelyn, our candidate for constituency number 8, Chesley Hamilton, constituency number 7, Mr. Lincoln David Pell, and also the members of the media who are here with us this morning. Good morning to everyone. The pandemic of the last 2 years crippled economies, wreaked havoc on lives and livelihoods, and forced countries to examine and re-examine their policies and their ways of doing business and taking care of their people. Everywhere, world leaders are being called upon to align their national priorities to meet the global challenges of today that impede our domestic progress. St. Kitts and Nevis, like every other country, and in particular, every other small island developing state, is still reeling and rebuilding from the economic shocks of the pandemic and from the supply chain disruptions compounded by the war in Ukraine. Our country also continues to face the impacts of climate change. Our Federation's focus must, of necessity, be on reimagining and redesigning a future that is healthier, cleaner, greener, more secure, and more affordable. A future that is more sustainable and more prosperous. The challenges of the times call for audacious, astute, and transparent leadership. The challenges call for unity of purpose and vision. The challenges call for people-centered policies. The interest of the people must be placed back at the center of this Federation's policies and programs to help us realize the future that Kittitians and Nevisians want to realize. Our citizens want and deserve a future where technology is used to lift people up and out of their circumstances, where trade, commerce, and foreign policy are used to our domestic advantage in support of workers and families to increase incomes and create opportunities, where every citizen can get their fair share, free from nepotism and corruption, from selfishness and ineffective governance. Our people crave and deserve a future where their ideas and talents can be transferred into opportunities, where debates are fostered for the national good so that citizens can be an intricate and necessary part of forging their own destinies and a common path to development for this nation. To build that future, we must together defend and challenge plans and policies that are not deemed to be for the national good. We must together uphold the rights of all citizens and fight for their priorities. As we look to the future of this Federation, we must present a modernized and forward-thinking worldview that is reflected in our policies and programs. We must ensure that they represent the interests, the values, the hopes, and dreams of our people. Furthermore, that it can meet the challenges of today and the ones that are sure to come tomorrow. The future that Kittitians and Nevisians seek is not guaranteed or even facilitated because the foundations of our governance are being undermined by the leadership. Instead of using power to build institutions, to build people, and to forge a brighter, more prosperous future for its citizens, the Harris administration is actively and publicly abusing its power and ignoring the wants and needs of the people. The Harris administration is undermining the people every time that it seeks to award contracts to friends and family members instead of the hard-working citizens of this great nation. The Harris administration is ignoring the voice and the rights of the people every time that it indulges in backdoor deals with foreigners that do not advance the cause of ordinary Kittitians and Nevisians. The Harris administration is rejecting the people in favor of nepotism and selfish and corrupt alliances. The Harris administration shows scant disregard for the priorities of the people of this nation, the people who put them in office. The new $2.4 billion Harris Prison Project, for example, is just another reflection of a government that is either out of touch with the people or simply does not care enough to represent their interest. The Harris Prison Project is a $2 billion project, monies that should go into funding social programs, housing, support for families and vulnerable groups, education, and health care. These monies should be spent on intervention programs, on the development of technology and the creative arts, and on building and upgrading recreational facilities to provide avenues for the healthy ventilation of ideas and talents for our people, especially the youth. A prison project of this magnitude, funded by foreign investors, does nothing to advance the cause of Kittitians and Nevisians. It is purely for the gain of those who invest in it and for Harris, his friends, and his family. The Harris $2.4 billion prison project does not represent the priorities and interests of the men and women who are working hard to build this country. At a time when our citizens cannot access enough of this nation's resources to make ends meet, when our brothers and sisters in Nevis are denied their fair share of the national pie, the Harris administration is building a $2.4 billion prison. At a time when the administration boasts of citizenship investment program, earnings of over $500 million per annum, our youth, our young families are still struggling to make ends meet. Our communities are desperate for resources, and our youth are calling for opportunities. PAM-CCM will not allow these issues to go unchallenged. The cause of the Federation is too great to allow Harris and his administration to govern with little or no accountability and transparency, and with borderline disrespect for the citizens that they are called to serve. The CBI program must be made to work for all Kittitians and Nevisians, for the elderly and the youth, for the villages and the towns. CBI generates enough funds to positively touch the lives of each citizen in a real transformative way, not as a handout, but hand up. This federation's task must be about building people, educating them, taking care of their health and social care, enhancing their lives, and securing their livelihoods. PAM and CCM cannot stand by and watch this administration build prisons instead of people. PAM-CCM will continue to interrogate and challenge plans and policies that are not representative and inclusive of the needs of our people. We take our responsibility to represent you seriously, and we will continue to advocate on your behalf. The upcoming election is perhaps the most consequential of our times. Too much is at stake. Are we going to gamble our children's future in the hands of the unscrupulous Labour or Harris leadership? Or are we going to take back our country from the hands of corrupt governance? PAM-CCM will guard our country against nepotism and ineffective governance. We will keep sending a loud and resounding message that we will not sit idly by while our people cry out in silence for effective representation. This is a charged moment for our nation, and at times like these, representation is critical. So are elections. This is how we make clear our concerns and our priorities. PAM and CCM, on behalf of the people that we still represent and the people that we hope to represent after the upcoming elections, are taking on this challenge with confidence to defend the priorities of the people. We call for better use of the people's resources. We call for the Citizenship by Investment program to be better managed and used to enhance the lives of people across this federation. PAM-CCM is pushing back on unfair, undemocratic, and fiscally irresponsible policies. That is why we are calling on the Harris administration to immediately halt the $2.4 billion Harris prison project and begin a period of national consultation with the people who elected you into office to represent their interest. Go back to the people to find out if in these challenging times, when they're trying to put food on their tables and send their children to school, and secure better health care for their parents and grandparents, when the young people are searching for hope and opportunities, when the creatives among us are calling for avenues to showcase and market their talents, when food security is lacking, and farmers and fisher folks are trying to find markets for their produce, I urge the Harris administration to consult with these folks and ask them, where does the new $2.4 billion Harris Prison Complex stand on their list of priorities, or does it? This is a call for national consultation on this Harris Prison project in the immediate. In the last 2 years, the world has changed. Priorities have changed. Our people are calling and counting on their leadership to represent that change and to bring them the change and prosperity that they seek. PAM-CCM is standing in the gap to force this interrogation of people-centered priorities. Make no mistake, the Harris Prison, like Harris's nepotism, like Harris's failure to facilitate and allow a fair share for all citizens of this federation, will be on the ballot in the upcoming general elections. I challenge you to listen to our call. Transparency, accountability, fair tendering processes, and good governance will be on the ballot in this election. CCM's vision for bettering the lives of our people, our leadership, our movement for prosperity and progress will be on the ballot in the upcoming election. Our PAM-CCM challenge is not about conflict, but representation. It's about people. We will always defend the interests of the people against potential threat to their lives and livelihoods. We have heard the argument that the prison is not being funded by the taxpayers of this nation. This is further illustration of how out of touch the Harris administration is when it comes to managing the people's affairs. It is not about who is paying for a new Harris prison. It is about asking in these times when so much is hanging precariously in the balance in terms of education or better hospitals and health care and providing livelihoods and opportunities. Is a new prison, a $2.4 billion prison, a priority? It is even in the top 5 of the list of priorities on any citizen of this federation. Will a new prison of this magnitude uplift the lives of our citizens? Will it bring added benefits to them? Will it make us more resilient from another pandemic or from climate and other existential shocks? Will it secure a better future for our children and young people? Our challenge is about common sense. It is about people-centered policies that bring about real change in real lives. Our challenge is about effective, in-touch, finger-on-the-pulse leadership. St. Kitts and Nevis is small inland area and in the size of our population. We do not have an abundance of natural resources or military might. Our strength, our wealth lie in our people, our human resources, and our ability to create the environment for them to unleash their full potential. In any democratic system, we must debate, we must argue, we must disagree, and we must challenge each other, especially our elected leaders, in protection of the national good. Our task is to consistently work toward a federation where people from all backgrounds and in all circumstances can thrive. Our task is to protect our best resource, guided by values and principles that uplift them. Our task is to build connections, pathways, institutions, and people That is what we are called to build. This is and will always be PAM CCM representation. We once again call on the Harris administration to pause this prison project and return to the people for consultation. If he is unwilling to do so, then we must force the halt of the prison project at the ballot box. Upon taking office, a PAM CCM government will immediately pause the project and evaluate the project's cost, allocation of funds, and contracts awarded. Thank you.
We want to thank the political leader of the People's Action Movement for his presentation. And I will now call on the Honorable Mark Brantley to give his presentation to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to all who are here, members of the press, members of the People's Action Movement, members of the Concerned Citizens Movement. Let me greet the Honorable Sean K. Richards, the leader of the People's Action Movement, and Mrs. Shani Gray, the next representative of the people of Number One. I am very happy to be here this morning, and I start by commending, of course, the good people of St. Kitts for a fantastic show at the St. Kitts Music Festival. After a 2-year hiatus, they have come back with a bang, and certainly I and my family felt good to be here and to be hosted by our brothers and sisters here in St. Kitts. It would be remiss of me on this big platform not to say that we expect to host you for Culturama in Nevis, and so we look forward for you coming over for Culturama this year. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that this joint press conference is timely. It is timely because now that the festivities are over and the music festival is over, it is time for us now to look to the future and to see what we intend to do as a country in this election that is upcoming. It is quite clear to all of us that St. Kitts and Nevis finds itself at a crossroads. We are at a crossroads in our history where we must make a determination as to how we see our country and how we see ourselves as constituent elements of this great nation of ours. It is true that since independence we have made considerable strides as a country, and that Kittitians and Nevisians at home and abroad have much that we can be proud of. The question is, can we protect those strides, and can we build on that foundation that has been built over the years? And that, to me, is what this election is all about. This election requires us to engage in a critical examination of those who are offering themselves for office. Those who are offering themselves in the various constituencies, those who are offering themselves nationally, we have to critically evaluate them. There are some who are coming to politics for the first time, and they will come with a track record of what they've done in their lives thus far. There are others, like myself, who are coming to say, judge us on our record, judge us on what we have done. And I can say here today that I am exceedingly proud of the record of the People's Action Movement and the CCM and our caucus in the government of St. Kitts and Nevis in the last 7 years. I'm exceedingly proud because I believe that a lot has been accomplished. A lot of good things have been done. And we were well on the way to the kind of St. Kitts and Nevis that we all want. However, along the way, we lost our way. And we lost our way in part because leadership emerged, and certain characteristics of that leadership emerged, which were unwelcomed and which are inimical to the development of our country. And when the time came to take a stand, I am proud that we took the right stand, and that history will in time judge us and say to us that we did the right thing to cut ties with a leader who had lost his way. Now, there were options available to us. We did not need to be here. We offered compromise. We offered a new position. And those efforts, certainly on the part of the Honorable Sean Richards and myself, were spurned. Those efforts were ignored. The attitude was that it is either my way or the highway. If I can't control it all. I prefer to mash it all up. I don't know if that is on press-like language, but I believe the people of the country understand what it means to mash up something. And that seemed to have been the attitude. And we felt that the people of St. Kitts and Nevis deserve better. And what have we seen since then? We have seen a level of activity, an orgy of spending and efforts made in every quarter to corrupt the institutions of government and the institutions of state. I believe that what we now see as the remnants of government, that it is in its final throes, and that in the next week at least we must have an election date. And when that election date is announced, I am appealing to the people of St. Kitts and the people of Nevis to go out and do the right thing. Not to vote for something that is being offered to you now, because I think all of you, even those of you who are getting something now, understand that it is not genuine. It is intended to give you something today for today, and tomorrow you're forgotten. And I use this prison project, or jail, because prison is a big word. Everybody understands jail. I use this jail project as an example. And I have said that any leader anywhere in the world who prefers to fund incarceration over education is a failed leader. Let me say it again. Any leader anywhere in the world who prefers to fund incarceration over education is a failed leader. And Sean has said it perfectly. What is the value of a $2.4 billion jail at this point in our history? We are just coming out of 2 years of a global pandemic when our economy suffered. Our people lost work, the workers at the Marriott, the workers at the Four Seasons, the workers at the Park Hyatt, our taxi drivers, our artisans, our entertainers, all of them were out of bread for 2 years. What are we offering them? Jail? Because jail cannot do anything for them. Where's the training? Where's the development? Where's the New Basti High School? You know, I've heard the argument being made that, oh, Cabinet approved the jail. And it seems a very interesting argument that anything good that has happened in the country, Timothy Harris said, I did it. Anything that is questionable, he said, the Cabinet did it. But who was the head of Cabinet? And this jail project was one of a number of projects that were discussed and ventilated in the Cabinet. The question I think the press and the public must ask is, why has Timothy Harris made the jail a priority? That to me is the fundamental question. He has not made Basti High School a priority. That was a Cabinet decision. He has not made drilling for water so that the people of Keon and the surrounding areas can get a regular supply of water after all these years of suffering. That was ventilated and agreed in the Cabinet. That is not a priority. Universal health insurance. Every one of us in our country have clamored for a new system to allow our people access to health care in an affordable way. All of us have the example of friends and family who are sick, and we see people going around with a little card asking for donations. Universal health insurance was intended to do away with all that, but that hasn't been a priority. JNF, Alexandra Hospital, our clinics, health care, none of those have been a priority. Our marijuana industry, the Cabinet has met, and I think my colleagues here will bear me out. I don't use marijuana, let me be clear. But every week I ask, what's happening with this commitment that had been made? That is not a Harris priority. The jail is his priority. And whenever things don't make sense, old people in Nevis say it's because perhaps we don't have all the facts. So I am asking the press to start to dig and to start to look. And when you start to dig and you start to look, it comes down to one thing. Who's making money off the jail? That really is what it comes down to. Who is making money off the jail? And I can tell you it is not you. If you follow the money, you start to understand why the jail is a priority over education. The jail is a priority over a new industry, terms of marijuana. The jail is a priority over healthcare facilities and over universal health insurance. The jail is even a priority over water for the people of Cairn. A jail, and I want you all to call it what it is, it's Harris Jail. I don't know who's going to go in it. I don't know. I don't plan to be there for sure. But I'm saying to you that if a jail is being built, then the second question you must ask yourself, who is it being built for? Or who you plan to put in there? And you start to ask these real questions, because I think it is critical for us to ask these hard questions, because leadership that makes that type of decision and that prioritizes the incarceration, the locking up of our people, over their education, over their health care, over the development of new industries in the country, tells you that that is leadership that has lost its way. And leadership that is concerned only with self, with family, and with securing wealth. Now, I have seen the Honorable Sean Richards has gone to the site, and the protestations that he, as an elected member, an elected parliamentarian in this country, can't go up to ask about a jail. We all know Timothy Harris, and we know how he operates. We know if Timothy Harris paves a sidewalk, he has to have a groundbreaking ceremony, and he has to have an opening ceremony for the sidewalk. How come this jail started in the dead of night? In fact, if it wasn't for Sean Richards, I wouldn't even know that the jail had started. But the jail started, so ask yourself, who providing security? Who providing the blocks and the construction? Most importantly, some 5,500 passports, I'm told, are involved. Who's doing the processing? I want people to start to ask these questions. Because when you ask them, you start to say, oh, now I understand why this jail is a priority. It has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with advancing our people in any way. It has to do with enriching a select few. And that, I think, ladies and gentlemen, is of fundamental importance. Now, I brought my phone with me. And you'll forgive me if I don't have a prepared speech per se. But I was consuming the music festival, Mr. Richards, so please forgive me. But a document that I have is of interest because it is the budget document for St. Kitts and Nevis for 2021. And there on the project number head 06051 and listed as project 0605119, we see the construction of a new correctional facility. So it's in the budget. Now, what is interesting is that the estimated cost that is budgeted, this was a budget that was brought by Timothy Harris as Minister of Finance and Prime Minister just last year. In the budget, on the head 0605119, construction of new correctional facility, we saw the prison estimated cost 88 million EC dollars. I want that to sink in for a minute. 88 million EC dollars. That's a public document. That's in the budget. Well, how in good God's name 88 million get to 2.4 billion? How? And these are the questions we must start to ask. Because the story now that, oh, it's not the public spending and it is our passport. And our passport belongs to you. It belongs to me. It belongs to all of us. And so you must ask the question, how did the cost of the prison jump from $88 million, that's the estimated cost, to a provision now for over $2.4 billion, same jail. I don't know if they're going to put golf course, nightclub, spa, casino, and other things in there. But at that price, for that facility, I suspect by next music festival, most people will be staying there. Because the level of luxury that is going to offer. And, you know, we joke because sometimes it sounds like a laughing matter. But if you budget $88 million in December of 2021, how now? You're talking about $2.4 billion. So the priority, that is the jail. And the amounts now that we're talking about for this jail expose the fact that this is a scam of all scams. And I agree with the Honorable Sean Richards that the PAM CCM team is calling on this project to be halted so that some consultations can occur. And if the consultations cannot happen within a few weeks left of this government, then it is certainly our view that the project must be stopped now and the new government must reevaluate. Now, I've heard some people say that the current conditions at the prison are not good and that we therefore need a new facility. I do not oppose that view. I feel that a humane government must look out for all members of the community, even those who have made mistakes and who find themselves incarcerated. However, I cannot see that any government anywhere in the world would make that a priority over education, over healthcare, over training and development for our young people, over building people. And so, in my view, a new prison cannot be at the top of the agenda. And when we start to evaluate this new project, we start to understand why it has been plucked out of the bag and elevated to the top. And I believe that all of us should be outraged about this. Now it brings me full square to what I want to say for the next few minutes about this notion of fair share. It is language that is easy to say, and I think a lot of people are asking naturally, what does it mean? And I want you to contextualize that Dr. Timothy Harris has repeatedly said that Nevis, that I am proud to represent, and that my colleagues are here, Alexis Jeffers and Eric Evelyn, are proud to represent, that Nevis has got some $400 million, he says, and that somehow we ought to be satisfied, that we're being greedy by us saying that we have not got a fair share of the inflows that have come to the country. Well, I want the people of Nevis and the people of St. Kitts, the people of goodwill, because ultimately we're brothers and sisters, to reflect that $2.4 billion in a jail is 6 times what Nevis has got over the past 7 years. It means that on a single facility to lock up people, you are spending 6 times what Nevis has received for its developmental needs over the past 7 years. Now, if that is fair, if that is what our people are willing to consider as adequate and equitable in our country, then something is wrong. And these are the points I think need to be made, because you hear the refrain constantly that somehow the people of Nevis are being greedy and that they're being ill-served because we are saying that all of the people in our country deserve a fair share. So what does fair share mean? Fair share is not a Nevis versus St. Kitts issue. I want to make that very clear. Fair share is saying that all the people of the country must benefit from whatever is available in the country. And if our passport is being negotiated, and that is the principal source of revenue now, accounting in some years for 45% or more of the national budget, then it means to me that that national asset and the proceeds of that national asset have to be shared equitably. And that is all that we have been saying. Not just the people of Nevis who have been locked out, but the people of St. Kitts as well. My colleagues are here from PAM. They used to complain, all of us used to complain, that they want a youngster in their community to be put on the STEP program. What was the refrain? Program is closed. That is what we were told. Can't add new people because the program is closed. Things are harsh because of COVID. The Honorable John L. Powell, he's here. For months and months and months, he requested a report on the STEP program. John L., you remember? Every week, somebody belly hurting them, they can't come, they're sick, they're late, they whatever. Cannot get these basic reports and basic information that could guide the cabinet. The PAP program, we were aware that potential candidates for the PLP were able to put people on PAP when sitting members of the cabinet can't do it. These things have to be said. So when we talk about fair share, we're talking about fair share for all of us. The Venezuelans gave us some homes. Where were the homes built? All in one constituency. I'm here in one village, not even one constituency, one village. And what happened to the other people in St. Kitts and Nevis? What happened to the people of Keon and Sandy Point? People of Newtown are number 2, where Journal has been agitating for housing for a long time. So fair share means that all of us, St. Kitts, Nevis, Kittitians, Nevisians, all of us, as the old people in Nevis who say, Tout moun sama bagay. I don't know if that's French, but all of you understand. Everybody will get an opportunity to share in what is available in the country. I don't see that any person of right mind could oppose that. The peace program, we have all supported it. We continue to support the program. We see the transformation that the program has caused in terms of our numbers, in terms of violent crime. We voted for and support that program. But when you look at what has happened and how the program is being managed, millions of dollars going from the Consolidated Fund to Development Bank. And once it gets to Development Bank, we don't know what happens to it after that. A murky black hole. And I have said to the Honorable Sean Richards that I want him to put me in charge of investigations. They call me the sheriff, I want to investigate something. You want to join me? Because I want to know what is going on at Development Bank. I hear they want to do audit of SCELEC, they want to do audit of UDC, they want to do audit of SCASPA, but nobody talking about Development Bank, which is the blackest, darkest hole in terms of money that is happening in this country. Where the money gone? When it is put there, what is done with it? And again, as sitting members of the cabinet, you cannot get a report. One day you hear it's 1,200 people on the peace. Next day you hear it's 1,300, and it's back and forth. You cannot get anything from the Minister of National Security, who was also the Prime Minister, Timothy Harris. And so what are we to do? So when we talk about fairness, we're talking about fairness across the length and breadth of St. Kitts and Nevis, where we can put the money that is being made to better use to ensure the sustainable development of our country. And that, to me, is what this election is about. This election is about what we as a people want to see for ourselves, our families, and ultimately for our country. And I'm hopeful that when the date is announced, and it will be soon, that our people will go out and do the right thing. Now, I'm available for questions. I'm here in support of the People's Action Movement, in support of this new effort. As we have said, 2 parties, 1 movement, or perhaps 2 movements moving together, CCM and PAM. I don't think it's a coincidence that it's the People's Action Movement and the Concerned Citizens Movement. And maybe it is right that we get away from the party idea and we start to move people forward. And that is what we're seeking to do. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you, the Honorable Sean Richards, for inviting me, and I certainly look forward to the questions from the press. Thank you.
I wish to thank the leader of the Concerned Citizens Movement, the Honorable Mark Brantley, for his presentation. Let me acknowledge the presence of some of my colleagues who are now present with us, in the persons of the Honorable John L. Powell, the Parliamentary Representative for Constituency Number 2, I almost said honorable, but let's speak it into being, the Honorable Kervin Milo Box Freeman, the next Parliamentary Representative for Constituency Number 3, the Honorable Troy Flanders, the next Parliamentary Representative for Constituency Number 6. And I think that would bring our full team, the Deputy Sheriff from Constituency Number 8, the Honorable Chesley O'Neill Hamilton. And so there you have it, our full team is here today. And now we are at the end of our presentations, and this is the opportunity for those from the media to come and ask the pertinent questions that you would like to ask of our leaders, not just in relation to anything that they have presented today, but in relation to anything that you may want to ask, because as you are aware these two movements are for the people, and as the Honorable Matt Brantley said, we are going to continue to move our people forward. And so I would ask you to come forward to the microphone that is provided, introduce yourself and the media house which you represent, and we would endeavor to answer all the questions asked. And so I see our first person is by the microphone, and so I await all the questions, and I'm sure the leaders of both the People's Action Movement and the Concerned Citizens Movement also await your questions.
Good morning, all. This question, either Mr. Brantley or Mr. Richards could answer. What exactly would a CCM and PAM administration do for the people of Nevis? Also, we heard the Premier just mention investigations. Every time a government changes, they're always, oh, we're going to investigate. This was being done, that was being done, this was dishonest, this was illegal, and what, corrupt, and blah, blah, blah. Yet nobody has gone to jail, not one single charge has reached across to the courthouse. The people are fed up of millions being spent in lawyer fees and what's not, just to say, okay, the money was abused. So what will become of any investigations once something is found not to be correct? And for Mr. Brantley, the people of Nevis are a bit upset that it took 7 years after, to have this matter resolved and to have left something that was not working. What guarantee do the people of Nevis have that if promises are not kept this time, that the people of Nevis are not going to have to wait another 7 years?
Thank you very much for the questions. This notion that it took 7 years, I think that I've tried to dispel that idea time and time again. The reality is that we were in a relationship. Team Unity was a construct of 3 different political parties. And so for a lot of that period, I think we sought to work things out as best as we can. I think all of us who were part of that construct understood the tensions that existed from time to time. And this ought not to be unusual. I have likened it to any relationship, whether it's a business relationship, a personal relationship, a marriage. My beautiful wife is here. I'd be lying if I said we don't have tensions from time to time, but we don't take it to the press. We don't take it to the public. We seek to work things out. That is what people do. And I think the contrary is equally true, that had we come out immediately and said that this isn't working, people would say, well, we gave you an opportunity. Why have you not tried to work it out? So in a way, I feel that we are being, criticized for doing what is normal, which is to try to work out difficulties in a quiet way prior to something coming to the public. I think things have come to the public now because the pot has boiled over, and that we have realized that all efforts to compromise and all efforts to do better have been spurned. The people of Nevis have tried time and time again. I think the people of Nevis first coalesced with the People's Action Movement that took us into independence. The people of Nevis later coalesced with the Labour Party under a Labour NRP administration. And most recently, the people of Nevis would have coalesced with Team Unity. And I believe that each relationship has had its own benefits and its own challenges, as all relationships would have. I'm sitting here next to my brother Sean Richards because I'm persuaded that he has the necessary temperament and character that can take us to the next level. And that is ultimately all that I seek. Somebody who sits in Church Street who understands that they are Prime Minister for the entire country. Not for part, not for some, but for all. And he has assured me that he can do that, and I'm satisfied that he can do that. And so we are looking forward to this administration, being fair to everybody. I'm sitting here as an individual, and yes, we have complained because the shoe on our foot has been squeezing pretty hard. But having said that, I believe that there's a need for every boy and girl in this country to understand that they are appreciated, that their value and their talent is appreciated, and that they have a contribution to make to the development of their country. And that is all that we're seeking to do. And if we don't get it right, the objective is to continue to try to get it right. Because so long as we have life, we must continue to try to improve. And that is why I'm here, and that is what we are seeking to do. In relation to investigations, you're right that people say all the time that we are going to investigate, and we have not yet had the maturity, let me use that word, in our own country, in our independence era, that people have actually gone to prison or paid a price. This might be the time. were in that jail. I have said that somebody will go to jail for that jail, and I'm persuaded that that is the case. I have announced today that as a sheriff, I have asked the Honorable Sean Richards to give me the job of investigating, and the deputy sheriff, the next representative for the people of number 8, has said that he will assist. And you know he's a serious fella. So even if I were to say, give them a chance, I believe he will say, let them who concocted this jail go and spend some time in it. And so I believe that the time is now when these issues have to be looked at, and the public has to know. A lot of people are being asked to take this and take that and get a little benefit here and a little money there. And I think people need to understand that it is ultimately our money. It is taxpayers' money. It is the resources of the country. And they must appreciate that, therefore, there have to be consequences. And that is why I continue publicly to call on our public servants not to allow themselves to be corrupted by politicians who are clinging on for dear life. To do the right thing to ensure that all payments and all requisitions for payments are in order. Because ultimately, they are the ones who are the keepers of the public purse. And they must not allow themselves to be corrupted or compromised. And I think that that's important. So I believe, with the permission of Mr. Richards here, that we will have the type of investigations that are necessary and the type of actions that will become necessary, because I think some of the things that we're seeing are suggestive of great criminal activity on the part of some individuals who are there and are seeking their utmost to cling on to power in this country. Well, I think that we've outlined, thank you for reminding me of that aspect of the question. What will the PAM and CCM government do for Nevis? I believe that what I've said to the Honorable Sean Richards is what I've said publicly. Be fair to Nevis. Let Nevis have what belongs to Nevis, its fair share. I think Team Unity actually had a clear idea and a clear construct. We actually reduced it into writing, the Charleston Accord, which set out a map, a blueprint for how we would manage. And had we followed that blueprint, I don't believe we would have been here today. And that blueprint clearly says that we will share CBI proceeds, for example, on a pro rata population basis. Once the expenses are out, we understand Nevis gets X, st. Kitts gets Y. Nevis is then able to do the projects that are critical in Nevis. And so really for us, it's about getting access in Nevis to our fair share. Notice I say fair or equitable. I didn't say equal, because st. Kitts is much bigger with a larger population. But getting an equitable share in Nevis, being able to do our projects in Nevis, and also, I think, which is of critical importance, saying to the people of Nevis that you are integral parts of the Federation. You are critical to our developmental agenda, and that it really doesn't matter if you're from Brownhill or you come from Taba. That wherever you are from, you are valued and you have a contribution to make. I don't believe we've yet had a national leader who has risen quite to that level, where people in St. Kitts and people in Nevis see themselves as part of the tapestry of St. Kitts and Nevis and the development of our country. And that is why we are seeking to make that difference moving forward.
Good morning, Glenn Bart, SKN Newsline. For both persons, Mr. Richards and Mr. Brantley. If PAM and CCM were to form the next government, how do you going to demonstrate to the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis the matter of accountability, transparency, both in terms of internal transparency among each other and transparency between the government and the public? How are you going to do that? Secondly, is there any commitment to address the CBI fair share issue with Nevis within the first 100 days of your government? And I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Indeed, there is that commitment to address the matter of the CBI's fair share of monies going to Nevis. It is a commitment that I have given publicly, and I stand by that particular commitment. Hence, within the first 100 days, that matter will be discussed so that it sends a clear indication not just to the people of Nevis, but to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, that this is an administration which is committed to all of the promises that it has made to the people. On the matter of your second question relative to accountability and transparency, there are various ways in which that will be accomplished. We have spoken, for example, about various pieces of good governance legislation. We have said, for example, that persons who need to know information from government must be able to access that particular information. And as such, in terms of the particular piece of legislation, the name is escaping me. Freedom of Information. The Freedom of Information Act will be passed as a matter of urgency so that the public can access information. Additionally, what we intend to do is to ensure that press conferences such as these are held on a regular basis so that persons like yourself from the media can come and ask the relevant questions and get the information that you do need. The cabinet briefings must continue, and it shouldn't be a matter of simply saying that the cabinet has approved a prison project. But the public must be told that the Harris administration, for example, has approved 5,000 passports to be sold at $175,000 per passport to build a prison. And that when you do the mathematics, that is $2.4 billion. The public must be told that the estimated amount to build the prison is some $88 million. So why do you need to sell that number of passports? The public must be told that since the approval of the 5,000 passports, that a submission has been prepared to go before the cabinet for the next 500 passports, costing some $238 million to be sold as part of that project. Persons have been asking, for example, about who are the persons benefiting. And so the public must be told likewise that the prison project has started. The public must be told who is selling the passports, including a company owned by the brother, one of the brothers of the Prime Minister. The public must be told that in terms of the prison project, all of the contractors who are involved, including the brother of one of the Prime Minister, who has been involved in the clearing of the land. Because this is critical information that the public ought to know. And so when you speak about accountability and transparency, that is part of accountability and transparency. The public must be told that whether it is a friend or a family member is also involved in providing security services at the very same prison site, and that a business has been established within just 100 feet from where the prison is being built to build blocks. You would have heard the gentleman in one of my daily lives is saying that no blocks has been sold to the prison project as yet, which in itself indicates there's an intention to sell blocks. So these are the kind of information which the public must be given so that there is full transparency and accountability in terms of the affairs of the public. Not that you come to the public and when it suits you, you say to the public, well, the Harris administration has approved this particular project, but you don't give it the full details, because it is only when you know the full details you're able to ask the relevant questions and get an idea as to whether or not there is full transparency and there is accountability for the public funds of the people. As Mark said, it can't be fair for Nevis to receive $400 million when you have 5,000 passports being sold, well, 5,500 passports being sold specifically to accommodate a prison. We have heard the cries from persons about healthcare, for example. And so where is healthcare in terms of being a priority in all of this? Again, that is about transparency, that is about accountability. You have a peace program for which you have budgeted $40 million. And we have seen a decrease in the number of homicides because of that. So why is it now a priority to build a prison with close to 300 rooms to accommodate who? Is it that there is an intention by the Harris administration to bring an end to the prison program, and so you're expecting to lock up more of our young men, and so this is why the prison has become a priority to you? That again is about full disclosure to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, especially to those young people who are benefiting from the peace program.
Well, SKN Vibes. A couple of questions. I want to start off where you left, Minister Richards, the peace program. What sort of groundwork was done by the government before the program was approved at the cabinet level, to the point that did you guys get any idea of how many persons were in this specific life that would be coming over to the program? And no, was there going to be a cap in terms of how many persons were actually going to be on the quote-unquote peace program? On the issue of fair share for Nevis, has any determination been made at this point before the next election in terms of what the fair share would look like in terms of a percentage? My other question has to do with, we're talking about the jail, and yes, an investigation is needed, but how is PAM CCM government going to bring together all sides? Because if you, let's say, quote unquote, you decide you found irregularities by the Douglas administration and the Harris administration, that's going to cause a further division. So what plans are currently in place to bring all sides together should you guys win the next elections?
I'll take your first question, which you said you were following up on my comments about the peace program and what sort of groundwork was done prior to the implementation of the peace program. I can't exactly speak to the full groundwork which was done prior to the implementation of the program. What we are indeed aware of is that we had an issue with homicides in the country. We know that when we looked at the stats, when we looked at the facts, that it was mostly young men who were being involved in the homicides that we saw. And so the program was implemented to target these young people and to get them to pursue an alternative lifestyle. For the most part, it has worked. But while you asked that question, you said on the tail end of my comments. Now, what I'm going to say also borders on the question that Glenn Batt would have asked earlier, and that goes back to the issue of transparency. Because initially, when the program was done, it came under the office of the Prime Minister, and it is still under the office of the Prime Minister. However, what we do not know is that the program is being administered through Development Bank. Due to the fact that it is being administered through Development Bank, a lot of the facts surrounding the program are now shrouded in secrecy. For example, if you ask how much the persons are being paid on a weekly basis, we can't exactly give you an answer to that question. If you ask how many persons are currently on the program, we can't give you an exact answer to that question. It was just last week that someone from my constituency sent me a message saying that a conversation was just had with a young man, and the young man indicated that he is now a member of the peace program. She said she almost came to tears, and her intention is to go and pray because she recognizes that young people are now being bribed. She stated that the young man has never been involved in any sort of gang activity. The young man has never ever offended the law. But here is this young man being placed on a peace program, and she came to the conclusion that it was basically to bribe the young man in order to get him to vote for the PLP on election day. These are the things that you know have happening. And so in terms of the peace program, there ought to be that transparency, there ought to be that accountability, because the taxpayers' monies are being spent for the program. We have said, and I repeat again, that we are supportive of the peace program. However, the peace program should not be shrouded in any iota of secrecy. The public must know how the monies are being spent, how many persons are benefiting from the peace program. And you should also get some indication as to the number of persons who have been on the program, whether or not coming out of it. You have had repeat offenders, whether or not coming out of it. You get some statistics so that you're really able to see the benefits, the full benefits of the program. I can say to you that in terms of the PhD that I've been pursuing, the peace program is a program that I intend to look at in terms of my dissertation and how the young men have used creative problem solving to stay away from gang activity. But I know in terms of getting some of that information, it might be rather difficult. And really and truly, the program ought, as I said, it to be one that in terms of the operations of it, in terms of the number of persons on it, etc., that all of that information is public. When you look in the government estimates, if you want to know how many persons, for example, are working at the Ministry of Finance, that information is there. If you need to know the salary scales for the persons working at the Ministry of Finance, that information is also there. And so likewise, one should be able to access the information relative to the peace program. And it is interesting that you don't get that sort of information coming before the public. In terms of what a fair share would look like, I think Mark would have answered that question. We have to look at the proceeds coming in from the CBI program, the expenses associated with it, etc., and you do the necessary calculations based on the populations between St. Kitts and Nevis to determine what is due to the island of Nevis. One of the reasons why perhaps you may not be able to immediately say a percentage is because you have to look at the population between the two islands. I think we generally accept that about 1/3 of the population lives on the island of Nevis. But we also said that the necessary calculations must be done in order to determine Nevis's fair share of the CBI proceeds. Your final question, I think, is what plans are in place to bring all the political parties together?
Yeah, with the fact that the CCM PAM government is, well, the party right now, you guys are campaigning on locking up those offenders, whether it be, well, the focus right now is on the prison. That's going to cause a further division in St. Kitts and Nevis. So what plans are in place to bring the citizenry together from each of the factions in society?
I think there ought to be a national consultations on these particular matters so that persons recognize that whatever the outcome is, it is not out of politics, but it is out of ensuring that in terms of accountability of the public monies, that the public monies are properly accounted for. And if it is that someone has offended the law in some way relative to the taking of public funds, that those persons ought to pay the price. If you, as in an ordinary citizen, go out on the road tomorrow and you commit what is considered to be a crime, you are expected to pay the price for that crime that you have committed. And no citizen is above the law. So whether it is a crime committed in or out of public office, the law is there for all of us to abide by the law.
Just for clarification on the CBI issue, both of you have spoken about fair share for St. Kitts and for Nevis and about calculating it based on population, a pro rata population basis. But I haven't heard any of you speak about federal reserves in terms of savings, in terms of money set aside for federal projects or emergencies and that kind of thing, hurricanes, situations like COVID-19. How does those kind of things calculate into the determination of fair share for St. Kitts and fair share for Nevis in terms of the CBI program? Next, could you share some light on the matter of the cruise pairs, the second cruise pair? Because we have heard all kinds of stories about what has transpired with the Canadian government in terms of the negotiations that occurred, but there seems to be some work that has to be done but cannot be done now because of court situations. So could you provide some clarification on what is happening with the cruise pairs?
I'll ask the Honorable Lindsey Grant to respond to your second question. With regard to the first question that you asked, you're the one asking the question, but I would like to ask your question, or perhaps to ask everyone here a question. Would you have preferred to see the passports being sold to create the type of fund that you reference, or to build a prison? What would be your priority at this point in time? Mr. Bat?
Yeah, if our passports have been, or citizenship, which involves the passports, were to be sold for developmental projects on St. Kitts, schools or hospitals, which we sorely need, and modern clinics, equipment, and that kind of stuff. That's where I would like to see my money going to, or the citizenship money going to. Okay?
Thank you. You have made your point very, very clear. You would prefer to see schools and hospitals and clinics and healthcare facilities being the priority for your passports being sold as part of the CBI program. Your view, I am certain, is not an isolated one, but represents a majority view. There is a young lady sitting in the room here, recently graduated from CFBC. And I am certain that if she is asked the same question, that she would give a similar answer. If you look at unemployment at this particular point in time, that also must be a priority for our people, because a lot of persons also have the view that very shortly we will very well be facing a recession. And so in terms of that rainy day fund that you're referring to, that must be put in place. And you asked about how do we go about putting it in place and ensure that both St. Kitts and Nevis are able to do so. The calculations for that can also be put in place, because there can be that agreement in terms of what is being given to Nevis. This particular percentage of it is for that particular fund, and likewise in St. Kitts, the cabinet determines what percentage of the proceeds of the program will be utilized for that particular type of fund. The fund is needed. There will come a day when we will not be able to get those type of proceeds from the CBI program, and that is why we must be careful as to what we invest the funds in, and also ensure that some of those funds are saved for when the funds will be needed.
Before the Honorable Lindsey Grant speaks, can I also just add that the IMF in its own consultations has repeatedly suggested that we should move to some kind of sovereign wealth fund with these proceeds. I am uncertain as to why that has been resisted, because that has been a suggestion that has been made now for certainly the last few cycles that they've spoken to me. They've asked about this sovereign wealth fund. As you know, in other countries, they have done that to great efficacy in terms of sustainable, having the level of funding to sustain development over the long term. The truth is we don't know what will happen with the Citizenship by Investment program. I think the program's fundamentals are strong, but the Honorable Sean Richards is correct that we need to plan for a rainy day. And I believe that those are simply mathematical questions as to how we allocate and how we ensure that both islands are in a position where they have some resilience built in terms of hurricanes, in terms of flood mitigation, in terms of drought, in terms of any of the climatic conditions that we face, and in terms of other exogenous shocks, like, for example, if we were to have another pandemic, what do we do? So I believe that that can only come about from people of goodwill in leadership sitting down, understanding the problems, and seeking to find common ground in terms of how they're worked out.
Yes, good morning to all. If I understand your question, it is with regards to the second cruise pier and the issue there. Well, let me begin by saying that I inherited that matter as the minister responsible for ports when I came in 2020. That matter had been a matter that has been ongoing for a very long time. It had been a matter that has been tied up in arbitration. The arbitration was between the SCASPA and CCC, that's the Canadian corporation. It was a very long and arduous matter, taking several millions of dollars in legal fees, I must say, to determine the matter. In a nutshell, at the end of the arbitration, the matter was decided by the arbitrators out of London that the repair work must have been done by CCC. That's what I understand. When we put that position to them, having had the judgment of the arbitrators, the position of the Canadians was that they weren't responsible for that. Because we wanted the pier to be in a position for the upcoming cruise season to be able to at least be able to berth the largest ships in the world, we've had to do some dredge work on the pier. The dredge work should have been started already, but in any event, the dredge work should be completed for the cruise season beginning September, October. I can't recall off my head how much millions it's going to cost, but several millions of dollars in terms of the repair work. While we have the dredge work, the dredges here, we are also going to dredge Pier 1, which has not been dredged for over 20 years. We were also going to do some work on the cargo pier. So the three piers, we were going to do work on them. The fact is that when the work is completed and we have the final invoice, we will then present that to the Canadians for payment. As to whether they will pay or not, that matter, that's another matter. I suspect we'll have to end back up in the court or in arbitration again. But in any event, to protect the lives and the livelihoods of Kittitians and Nevisians in terms of the pier being able to effectively do what it's intended to do, we took a decision to do the dredge work even at this stage where the Canadians are basically denying that they have the responsibility to do the work coming out of the arbitration. I must also say that in the arbitration, I don't know if you want to call it success, but really the Canadians were in their efforts to succeed on the claim. They did put in a claim for something in the region of, I think it was $17 million, which is say SCASPA owed them for work that they had done. In the arbitration said no, they are not owed. So the only really outstanding issue with regard to the second pier is with respect to whether or not the work that we are going to do in terms of the dredge would be paid by the Canadians, or at the end of the day, SCASFA will have to foot that bill. I don't know if that sufficiently answers your question.
There was also this matter of the Canadian government taking, I think it's Casper, to court in Canada. Do you know anything about that?
No, I know nothing of that. Under the agreement, any dispute should go to arbitration or to the London Court of Arbitration, which is what happened. And so the situs of the arbitration is in London. That went through all the necessary steps, and that was concluded. I am not aware of any issue out of the Canadian courts. Yeah.
Okay, Hewlett, Department of Information in the Nevis Island Administration. Just a few follow-up questions. Is there any concern about the policies and projects that appear to are being implemented with a high degree of haste and the implications that would have for the next government? For a party that popped up overnight, expanded overnight, they seem to have, the party led by the Prime Minister appears to have unlimited funding for campaign. Is there any concern at all that if PAM and CCM forms the next government, that there will be anything left in the Treasury to carry out their plans and projects, the ones that they've been outlining? And if you haven't said already, if I missed it, I apologize. What are some of the priority areas that a PAM and CCM government would tackle once in office? Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Hewlett, for those questions. Let me begin by saying that I have issued a press release indicating that indeed both PAM and CCM are concerned about new contracts being signed by this current administration. I want to highlight the fact that this administration only has 3 elected members. Only 3 elected members and 2 senators. The majority of elected persons prior to the 10th of May would have stated in a letter to the Governor General that we no longer support Timothy Harris as a Prime Minister. So on one hand, you have had 6 of us who were part of that administration who were on the inside, who stated we no longer support him. You have a next 2 elected Labour, St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party parliamentarians. And so here it is. Do you really feel comfortable that 3 elected persons should be signing contracts for millions of dollars on behalf of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis? They don't represent the majority, and that really and truly ought not to be the case. It is perhaps why the NGOs also issued a code of conduct and basically asks for the very same thing, that this administration should not engage in the signing of any new contracts, because the NGOs also recognize that during this particular point in time, when you have a minority administration, an administration that I would say is on its way out, it should not be signing contracts for millions of dollars on behalf of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. What is the hurry to do so? These are contracts which can wait. We have an election which I expect will be in about 3 weeks' time. And so no new contracts, whether these contracts are coming from the federal government itself or even from any of the statutory corporations. No new contracts should be entered into. We have stated it, and the NGOs have also expressed that particular concern?
I think, Monsieur, that you asked about what appears to be the unlimited amounts of money available to the PLP for its campaign. And I believe that is why the press is so important, because you are asking the questions that need to be asked. We are concerned, for example, that the very priority that is being accorded to some of these projects, that campaign funding is part of that. I am persuaded that the prison project, for example, and the billions of dollars that are anticipated to be earned there, the fact that the work has started, my humble opinion would be that passports are already being negotiated for that particular project. The question is, where is that money going? Who might be benefiting from that money? I am also concerned because we think programs such as the Peace Program, where monies are being moved from the Consolidated Fund to the Development Bank, and thereafter we do not know what happens to those monies, that all of those monies are being used in the re-election efforts of Dr. Harris and his cabal. And so I am concerned that the monies that we're seeing out there, and that is why I'm thinking that a new government must shine some light on those activities, that frenzy of activity that we've seen since on about the 10th of May until now, and to determine how best to move forward. If we get a treasury that is empty, it had to have been emptied in some way. And there had to have been some mechanism by which that treasury was emptied. And that is why we're saying that it is necessary to have a look. I think that we should consider some of the desperate actions that we're seeing in that light. Because I feel that there's some people who understand that their activities are criminal activities, and they're trying, therefore, to do everything they can to ensure that no new government gets into Church Street, because that way they can cover up, they can ensure that no light is shone on the activities that have occurred. We intend to shine that light, and that is why I continue to appeal to our public servants in particular not to become co-conspirators in that type of activity, because we feel that the country ought to operate in a particular way and in a transparent way. We are hearing all manner of things being said. We are hearing, for the first time, we're hearing accusations leveled against us, the 6 of us who took a stand. And I want to be very clear here today. Many of us could have just gone ahead with what was happening, not said anything, collected our monthly salary or whatever it was available, and kept our mouth shut. We took a stand that that was not the way that we wanted the country to go. That was not what we had committed to each other and to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And for that, we paid the price in having our instruments revoked. And so we have been removed from the cabinet as of May 10th, I believe, was the date. Since then, the Honorable Sean Richards is correct, that we have what I have termed a kangaroo cabinet. He's been kind, but I don't see how this cabinet could really manage a country where you have 3 elected members and 8 constituencies, including the whole of Nevis, are without representation in the cabinet. I don't know how that could make sense. And engaging in contracts. So we are now hearing things like justifications as to why what happened. And the truth must be told that Dr. Harris acted on that day, the 10th of May, because he had been advised by the Speaker of the National Assembly, Michael Perkins, that the motion of no confidence would be heard that Monday. That's as simple as that. He knew that come Monday, he would have been the first Prime Minister to have been removed by way of a motion of no confidence. And so he rushed up to ZIZ and said he not only dissolving the House, but he is revoking appointments that he had made. Since then, I hear all kinds of things. The 6 of us were not performing, we weren't attending cabinet, we were lazy, and all kinds of things. And I reflect, and I said to myself, well, if all of this was happening and he knew, why he didn't fire us long time? Didn't fire us for 7 years. 2020, we had an election, and the same people went into the election together. So what does it say of his leadership, or lack thereof? That now he says, the reason I got rid of them. The truth is that by the time Timothy Harris said he got rid of us, we had already gotten rid of him. And that is the reality, because our letter to the Governor General stated unequivocally that we no longer support him as Prime Minister. And all that happened after was as a consequence of that. And I think that these things have to be put in their proper context so that our people understand that what you're hearing now are just desperate efforts to distract. We want an election. We ought to have had an election already, in my view. And that election now has to come. And we are demanding that election comes so that the people can go to the polls and institute a government that they want. We cannot continue with this, I don't even know, government light? I don't even know what you want to call it. Right? Whatever this is, we cannot continue. We're becoming a laughing stock. And I'll go further, you know, and the Honorable Sean Richards would forgive me, but just to say how much we've become a laughing stock. We had the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kigali, Rwanda. And that Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting is a critical meeting that occurs every 4 years. And why it was so critical is because we had the meeting to select the new Secretary General of the Commonwealth. We had Baroness Scotland, who's a candidate born in Dominica, a Dominican mother and an Antiguan father. She was the incumbent, but she was being challenged by the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, the Foreign Minister of Jamaica. And I believe it should be a matter of concern to all of us that St. Kitts did not vote at the Commonwealth Heads meeting in Kigali. St. Kitts Nevis, let me be more precise, did not vote. And we did not vote because what was necessary for us to vote in the absence of the Prime Minister and in the absence of the Foreign Minister, what was necessary wasn't done. And I am no longer there, but I was getting the calls. And people are saying to me that they know that if I were there, that would not happen. It was an embarrassing situation for St. Kitts and Nevis, that our vote was the only vote in the Commonwealth that wasn't registered in Kigali. That is why I say this is a kangaroo cabinet. And the quicker they announce the election so that we could put them out of their misery, the better. And that is what I have to say today.
Mervyn Thompson, ZIZ. Piggybacking on what you just said about the vote for the Commonwealth Secretary General, what should have been done that was not done? Also, what is the stance of the collective on the building of the Bastille High School with both former education ministers being from PAM? The sitting government is ready to start building. Labour says it will not start now and will not build on the aquifer. Are you in agreement with the government, or what will be done?
Let me go to the last question first. Let me see. No construction of the Bastille High School will start at this point in time. What the government is doing is basically just gimmicks and tricks. The Bastille High School project is a project which began when I was Minister of Education. The first thing that we did was a temporary Bastille High School. It took perhaps about a year or 2 years to get the plans for the new Bastille High School. When we got the plans for the new Bastille High School, those of course would have been turned over to the Public Works Department. Initially, it was supposed to be a design and build contract so that the company which designed it, Innotech, would have been the same company to construct the Bastille High School. We eventually recognized that there would have been some legal issues with that in terms of the tendering of the school. And I want to come back to that point about tendering, in terms of the tendering of the school. As such, the cabinet then took a decision that rather than a design and build, the design has been completed. So what would be done is that Innotech would be given a contract in terms of construction management, so that the project would become that of Public Works and Innotech would only be managing the construction of the school. Even that raised several concerns that took quite a few months to resolve. Because when the financial secretary saw the amounts to be paid by Innotech per month for the construction of the school, the financial secretary raised concerns. The government then had to renegotiate with Innotech in terms of the monthly payments for the construction management aspect of the project. Now, a first contract had been given to Innotech. Basically, the first contract spoke to the design of the school and the hoarding of the site. So that what perhaps you may see being done at this particular point in time is the clearing of the land and the hoarding of the site. The agreement was then that the school itself would be placed out to tender, and it would be placed out to tender in such a manner to allow as many contractors as possible to benefit, so that the foundation probably would be done by one company. That has to go out to tender. And if you look at the Procurement Act, you have to put it out to tender for about 8 weeks. You work at ZIZ. Have you seen anything in the media in terms of the tendering for any aspect of the school as yet? Not a single aspect of the construction of Bastille High School has been put out to tender to date. After we would have basically gotten to that phase, when we felt we were finally ready, Innotech itself raised a concern and said until there is insurance on the entire project, it is not even going to put up one sheet of board to hoard the site. And the hoarding of the site is basically where you put up the materials surrounding the site, so you don't have persons entering willy-nilly. So Innotech made that an issue. And again, we had to go out to different insurance companies to ask those insurance companies to provide a quotation in respect of the construction. After several weeks of doing that, and we got quotations, the chairman himself of cabinet made a decision that national insurance must be given the contract because national insurance belongs to the government. And so again, we were back and forth with national insurance in terms of getting a quotation. National began asking a number of questions. Are you going to build in phases? If you're going to build in phases, how much phase 1 is going to cost, how much phase 2 is going to cost, etc. And so we had to get that information and provide it to national insurance. National insurance has a reinsurer, and that is out of London. And so even in terms of getting the information, they had to be dealing with their counterparts out of London to get the necessary information. And again, that took some time. So I think it was only in March or April that was resolved. As a matter of fact, I remember just before PAM's convention, I sat in a meeting with the Prime Minister discussing some of the very concerns that we came to the public with. He asked about the Bastille High School, and realistically, when I think this whole matter would be resolved so that construction would start. And I said to him, I don't think that perhaps until the end of June, all of those matters would have been resolved. So all of this talk that you hear about Sean and Jonell as ministers of education and Bastille High School cannot start, he must give the full facts surrounding Bastille High School and all of the issues pertaining to Bastille High School. The public knows, for example, that an EIA was needed in terms of the impact on the environment. And after we would have received that out of an abundance of caution, we went back to our next company to get yet a second one. And it was after that we had the town hall meeting at the Tucker Clark Primary School, whereby persons were able to come and ask questions. So when you hear all of this talk about Bastille High School and Bastille High School not being able to start because of Sean and Jonell, there were several issues impacting the construction of the Bastille High School. Now, I made the point earlier about tendering, because here it is that you have a prison project which is being built. And I recall that we went to cabinet because he knows a lot of the things that we discussed in cabinet, but he must say some of the other things which we discussed in cabinet. Because one of the other decisions taken by the cabinet is that any government project, I think in excess of $200,000, must go out to tender. Here it is that a decision has been taken relative to a prison that is being built at a cost of $2.4 billion, and which company in St. Kitts, because it is, in terms of value, the most valuable in terms of quantum of dollars project, capital project, being undertaken at this point in time. And here it is. Not one company has been able to tender on this project, whether it is to provide the blocks or to provide the steel. Not a single company has been able to provide a tender for the construction of this project. And I want persons to also get the point that in terms of the sale of the passports, the monies, the $175,000 per passport, is not going into the government treasury. It is the companies that is selling the passports, that are selling the passports, collecting the money and doing the construction. That is why you have had various young persons, including some of them on the peace program, who went to Development Bank, benefited from loans from Development Bank to do trucking, and not one of those companies were able to benefit in terms of the clearing of the land, because one family member dealt with the clearing of the land for the prison project. Those are the facts that we need to speak to. We see Park Hyatt being built, and when Park Hyatt was being built, you have young people who came over from Nevis to be part of the construction. You had young people from throughout St. Kitts who were able to be part of the construction of Park Hyatt. Interestingly, when I went to the prison site on Monday, the only local person I saw there was Mr. Ham. They said Mr. Ham who said that no blocks have been sold as yet to the prison project. He's the only local person I saw there. The gentleman who approached me could barely speak English, and so he couldn't communicate with me. He called somebody else on some phone, and the person there on the phone, "Who are you? What are you doing there? What do you need to know?" And he too can barely speak English. So again I ask, what happened to the local young people in this country in terms of a project for $88 million, budgeted for $88 million, but 5,500 passports being sold for over $2 billion to fund this project? You have young persons out there right now, some receiving $1,000, some receiving all sorts of money from what we have been told in exchange for a vote. And so those young persons must ask themselves that in terms of what you're receiving and in terms of what others are benefiting from this project, who are the persons really, really benefiting? I also understand that in terms of the peace program, because I had a question about it earlier, is that an additional $20 million is now being requested from the Ministry of Finance to cover the peace program for the rest of the year. And so you had the question earlier in terms of, do you have a concern about how this election is being financed? And we see how the election is being financed. Because if you budgeted $10 million for the peace program this year, we ain't through half of the year yet. The month just finishing. And you're already requesting an additional $20 million. $20 million to do what? And so we go back to the question, how many persons are on this peace program? How many have been added since the 10th of May? Now that we are facing a general election. And is it just the persons on the peace program who getting the money from the peace program? Again, I ask the young men, are you certain that the monies which are budgeted for you as part of the peace program, that other persons are not receiving more than you are receiving?
Mr. Abel, before you go, I just wanted to answer the question about Kigali. I think the question was put as to what needed to be done. My understanding is that the necessary documentation needed to be put in place because, of course, Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, by its very terminology, it's a meeting of heads of government. Since St. Kitts and Nevis either doesn't have a head or doesn't have a head that is prepared to travel. I don't know if the travel would have taken him through London. But clearly there was an issue with this particular head going anywhere. He has a foreign minister who clearly didn't go anywhere. And so the problem was that those who were in Kigali had no authorization, couldn't sit among heads, and couldn't sit among cabinet members in order to vote. And so that was a difficulty. And I think it is a really sad day for us that St. Kitts and Nevis did not vote. Among the 53, I think, members of the Commonwealth, that we were the only ones that did not vote.
Final questions. One, we are on the topic of campaign financing. Would you say, either Sean or Mark, that while you were in government, you guys blundered when it came to campaign finance legislation and actually pushing that through 2015 and 2020, where you guys increased your majority in the National Assembly? I want to go back to the CBI program. There were acknowledgements that the program is under threat. What plans you guys have for this program should you form the next government, knowing very well that it was said that Russia was one of our key source markets for applications? Have you guys signed on to the NGO's Code of Conduct for elections? And finally, in terms of sporting infrastructure in St. Kitts and Nevis, what plans do you guys have for those in light of the fact that the football stadium has its fair share of issues? There are now cracks opening on the track up at Kim Collins. So what are your plans going forward for those?
Well, let me take the CBI issue. I think that it is well known that St. Kitts and Nevis pioneered this idea of citizenship by investment, leveraging our citizenship for investment for the country way back in 1984. I'm very proud of the fact that we gave the world this idea, and it has now become a multi-billion-dollar industry globally, with other big countries, Cyprus, Malta, Portugal. US has an EB-5 visa program. Canada had a program as well that allowed a lot of Hong Kong Chinese to emigrate to Canada when Hong Kong was going back to Chinese rule after 100 years of British rule. So the idea is really one that I think we as a people ought to be proud of. I like to say we gave the world the idea of citizenship by investment. Dominica, Antigua, Barbuda, St. Lucia, Grenada, they all now have a program as well. The issue for us in terms of longevity of the program has to do with the quality of the program. It has to do with the level of due diligence. It has to do with the safety and security of our program. The difficulties that we've encountered in the past had primarily to do with when those controls were dropped, that we became lax in those controls. And we remember there was a time when, for example, the government of the day, the Labour NRP administration, had removed the place of origin from our passport. And that was designed to allow some individuals who perhaps ought not to have got the document to be able to access the document. That led to difficulties with the United States. It led to, of course, us losing our visa-free access to Canada. Since then, I think that we have improved considerably. I believe the Untaken government in 2015, there was an analysis that was done by IPSA. I believe that was the group, and they made certain recommendations which were implemented. In terms of strengthening the program, I think we need to be speaking to our partners, particularly those in the United States and the European Union. We need to be assuring them of the safety and security of our program. We need to be open and transparent in sharing information with them, particularly with the intelligence services, if this so require, in order for us to check the bona fides of applicants, to ensure that no bad actors get access to the St. Kitts Nevis passport. We need to be rigorous in our screening so that our international partners are clear that we offer what we have said is the platinum standard. And we need to guard our program jealously from illicit actors getting access to our program. To me, that is where we need to be. But it can only happen with dialogue. It can only happen through effective diplomacy, speaking with our partners on an ongoing basis and allowing them to understand that this program is a critical part of our national development, a critical part of the matrix for development for St. Kitts and Nevis, and therefore a program that is worth protecting. I have not been one of the doom and gloom individuals about citizenship by investment programs, because this program has now existed since 1984. By my tally, that is well over 35 years. And therefore, it means that it is a program that can have longevity if managed properly. Now, you mentioned Russia. The Russia-Ukraine situation, yes, has posed some difficulty. I am not sure, because even that, the cabinet was not given information as to where our applicants are coming from. How many applicants do we really have from Russia, from China, from other parts of Asia, from the United States? The information that I have has certainly been anecdotal. So, for example, I know through contacts with some service providers that our program is actually quite popular, believe it or not, with Americans and Canadians. And one may think that that is counterintuitive, but they are telling me that a lot of Americans are applying for St. Kitts Nevis citizenship. So it is not just Russia or China or those countries. There are lots of countries across the globe, countries in Africa, for example, that have seen value in our program. And I'm pleased, as Minister of Foreign Affairs, despite the allegation that I didn't do any work, I brought the passport to #1 in the entire region. And I think that that is something that we ought to be very proud of. So maybe if I was still there, we would have voted in Kigali as well. So I make that, and to say to our people that really, insofar as our diplomatic standing, insofar as our place in the world, I think in the last few years we did a good job of ensuring that we were without scandals of any kind, insofar as our diplomatic engagements have been concerned. And that is something that we would need to look forward to restoring again in the very near future.
Final questions for me. And it refers to the upcoming elections. Last week, the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party expressed concern that the Timothy-led government might be using the what? Travel regulations. Right, the COVID-19 travel regulations to prevent certain persons from entering the country to vote. Do you believe that is the case? And also, what is your stance on this same issue with regards to dropping the travel-related protocols for St. Kitts and Nevis at this time? Secondly, could you comment on whether or not CCM and PAM have signed on to the code of conduct that was issued recently? All right, thank you.
Mr. Barth, thank you. Yes, both CCM and PAM have signed on to the Code of Conduct. I was very pleased to append my signature as leader of CCM. And I want to commend the NGOs for what I think is a comprehensive statement that they put out and a very fair and balanced analysis of the situation. And so we're very happy and very proud to sign on to that. And I have confirmed with the Honorable Sean Richards that the People's Action Movement has also signed on. In relation to the COVID travel protocols, I think that the concern is a legitimate concern. We have had a situation, for example, whilst I was at the music festival on Friday night, I was in a corner speaking to a very good friend of mine in the US who had some guests of hers who were coming and could not check in because they had not yet received the confirmation that they could come. I was able to resolve that. And then very early the next morning, I had a call from a resident from Nevis coming home and traveling with her children who had the same problem. In fact, they were at a check-in counter in Atlanta and could not check in because of this confirmation. That had nothing to do with the politics. That was just people who were traveling. In the first case, tourists coming to stay at the Four Seasons. In the second case, nationals who are trying to come home to see their families. I think when we look at COVID and look at what has happened, St. Kitts and Nevis has done remarkably well compared to our neighbors, compared to what we see happening across the world. And I believe that most of our neighbors have now moved past this requirement of having to fill out forms and all that in terms of entry to get into the country. Now, I've heard the argument made that we've had a recent number of cases, but I have said publicly and privately that we are past now the stage of just counting COVID cases. That, to my mind, now is meaningless. It is clear that people are going to get COVID. There may be people in this room right now who have COVID. COVID, to my mind, has now become something that we ought to expect and we must live with. We continue to encourage people to vaccinate because that is the best protection that we have based on the scientific evidence that's available to us. And I'm sitting here vaccinated and boosted, and we encourage people to do that. The reality is that we can no longer look simply at the number of COVID cases as a determinant of how we travel and what the protocols are. And I have said that it is time now for us to delve deeper to look at the number of hospitalizations and the number of deaths. Because if we have 100 cases and nobody's in the hospital and nobody's dying, then it seems to my mind to be a wrong approach to continue with the same level of rigor as we had when we were in the throes of the pandemic. And so that concern is a very legitimate concern. I spoke to someone who said to me that they are aware of many who wanted to come for the music festival but did not come because the travel protocols for them were too difficult. Within the United States now people are moving about freely. In fact, some people are even having difficulty coming out of Europe to try and find a site where they could get a test for entry purposes. So my own position is that I think that we need to look very carefully at this. The health professionals have guided us effectively thus far, but I feel at this point we need to now pivot towards the economy, towards tourism, towards getting our country back on track, and we need, at the same time, as they say, to be able to walk and chew gum. Keep an eye on the COVID, but focus more on hospitalization, focus more on deaths, rather than this count of saying we had 5 new cases today, or the country has 70 new cases. What is the relevance of new cases if there are no impact, there is no impact, on the lives and livelihoods of people? So we need really to have a rethink on it. And I am concerned, knowing the man that is Timothy Harris, that he will do anything, including trying to block PAM people and CCM people and Labour people from coming home to vote. So we have to be concerned about any effort now to manipulate the systems, the entry systems, in the context now of frustrating the efforts of our citizenry to vote. And whilst I'm saying that, let me appeal to all of those out there who are able to vote, that they make preparations to come and come soon, because I expect that an election will be called. I have a little wager going that I think it will be called this week, but if I'm wrong, it must be called by next week. And once that is called, then certainly we will have to see how those protocols are managed. That is why I continue to urge public servants who manage these portals to not allow themselves to be compromised, but to do what is right and to allow our people to come home to vote. If I had my preference, I would remove that requirement altogether, because I do not believe it serves any useful purpose at this point. And if it can be, as we expect it will be, abused, then that is even more reason to have it removed right away and allow our people the capacity to travel in and out of their country as they had been accustomed to prior to COVID. So that I'm very clear on. I do not believe that the requirements now in place still have any relevance given the situation where we are, where we have, I think, the highest vaccination rate, among the highest in the region. We have the lowest cases of COVID in the region, the lowest number of deaths in the region. I think on balance, we should be rewarding our people with greater relaxation of the entry requirements. And when we look at mass festivals like the Music Fest that was just finished and how people went out and enjoyed themselves, it is demonstrative that the country is looking post-COVID now. The country is looking beyond the pandemic. The country is saying that the pandemic is behind us, let us move forward. And I think it is time that government responds accordingly.
Campaign finance is part of the good governance legislation that we spoke to prior to 2015, and it still remains a priority for PAM and the CCM administration. On the heels of what Mark would have stated just now, while there is that particular concern in terms of the restrictions for persons being able to come into St. Kitts and Nevis, I am also well aware that based on what I'm seeing in social media, there are concerns also about a number of persons who are coming into St. Kitts supposedly with new passports, and so you have a number of questions being raised by persons as to whether or not these persons are registered voters, if there is some intention to try and use these persons to steal the general election. I want to say to all of our people that we have to remain vigilant in terms of being watchdogs. We have to constantly monitor the voters list. And before election day, you also need to make a note of the persons who you know to be overseas to ensure that no one is using an ID for any of these persons. We would have seen the list for the month of May, and so you also need to ensure that when you scrutinize your list, that there aren't any new names on the list which did not go through the normal registration process. Thank you.
I want to thank all those who are present from the media for your questions, and I want to thank our political leaders, the Honorable Mark Brantley, the leader of the Concerned Citizen Movement, and the Honorable Sean Kenneth Richards, the political leader of the People's Action Movement, and the next Prime Minister for answering so honestly and thoroughly, and I want you to give them a round of applause. I would now invite the Honorable Mark Brantley to give final comments at today's press conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, I end where I started by thanking you for the opportunity to be here, to thank the Honorable Sean Richards and the team for inviting me and my colleagues from the Concerned Citizens Movement to be a part of this press conference. I think that engagements such as these are critical as we seek to put ourselves before the people, to say to our people that there is a better way, and that what we need in government are people who are committed to them, committed to service of our people, not committed to self. And that for me is very important. Wherever we have leadership that descends into a preoccupation with advancing self, then that is not leadership that is good for you. And I have said a few things here today, particularly in relation to this jail project, that I'm hopeful will resonate with the public. And I end by reiterating one such comment, that any leader who prefers to spend on incarceration over education is a failed leader. Thank you.
Thank you. I now would invite the next Prime Minister, the Honorable Sean Kenneth Richards, to give his closing comments.
Thank you, Natasha. As I close, I want to say once more to the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis that this election is an important one. Therefore, when you go out on election day, you know that there are consequences with regard to who you choose as the next government of St. Kitts and Nevis. Do not be fooled by Dr. Harris. I have said before, if it is one thing that is certain, at the end of the next election, Dr. Harris will not be the Prime Minister. I have colleagues in here who are in cabinet. The colleagues can speak to the character of the gentleman. This is a gentleman who said to us that the roofing program has finished, while the roofing program was still taking care of persons in constituency number 7. I understand that the program has now restarted. Your monies are being used to repair your roof. You do not owe anyone a vote because your roof is being repaired. I also understand that a number of persons are now being taken on the STEP program after we had been told that that program has come to an end. I understand that the intention is after the election to remove you from the STEP program. Therefore, vote for the candidates of PAM, vote for the candidates of CCM, to secure your future. Many of you were told, and we were told the same thing, that the PAP program is being audited and no new persons are being taken on the PAP program. And now we see dozens of persons being taken on the PAP program. Some of you would recall that perhaps in 2020 you were placed on the program, and the very same month after the election, you were removed from the program. Do not be fooled by the gimmicks. Do not be fooled by the tricks. Finally, I said to you that the CBI program is one that was initiated by the People's Action Movement. And in that regard, of course, we want to say a very special thank you to persons like Dr. Herbert and Sir Kennedy, who were the pioneers of that program. When that program was put in place, the program was put in place to benefit all of the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, not for one family to benefit from the program, as is being done with the $2.4 billion prison project. No one ever accused Sir Kennedy or Dr. Herbert of using the program to benefit family members, because they saw the benefits of the program for the entire Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. I mean, the benefits were so much that other countries around the region copied the same program, but here in St. Kitts and Nevis, you now see how the program is being abused. And so the $2.4 billion Harris prison should be a concern for every citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis. It is being prioritized over health care. It is being prioritized over insurance, health insurance for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. I have spoken to many persons on the campaign trail who have stated that they can't afford to seek health care. The young man in Crabhill who spoke to me about having to go and look after his eyes, but what is affecting him is having the necessary money to do so. The young man who's in the hospital who complained about having to find money to do a critical surgery. An elderly man I met in Connery recently, who again complained about health care and being able to access money to look after himself. Chesley has spoken about the elderly couple in Keys, both on pension, who paying some $80-something thousand in respect of the two of them for treatment, no insurance, to be able to afford health care, but yet a prison being built for $2.4 billion. And it is being built because he intends to end the peace program. And so I want to say to the young men here in St. Kitts and Nevis that the Harris's administration plan is to incarcerate you. And that is why a prison is being given priority. I mean, how do you look in a budget estimate and a prison is budgeted at $88 million, but then 5,500 passports are being sold for $2.4 billion to finance this project. Park Hyatt sold close to 300 shares. Close to 300 shares were allocated to Park Hyatt when Park Hyatt was being constructed. A five-star resort. You have many locals working there, contributing to the economic development of St. Kitts and Nevis. Only 300 shares. And now for a prison, 5,500 shares. And again, you have to ask, who are the persons benefiting from the construction of this project? This isn't a government which has your priorities right. The gentleman asked about the football stadium. He asked about the athletic stadium. These are the priorities that we need to look at. Benefiting all of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Not a prison project for one brother to benefit from the sale of passports and next one to benefit from trucking and the clearing of the land, and somebody else to benefit from selling blocks and from security. You have TDC, you have Hosfords, two well-established companies. You have Contec, accustomed to selling blocks to the people here in St. Kitts and Nevis. But no, they are not to benefit from this project, because this project, it is about family and friends. I ask the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis to do the right thing on election day. The final thing that I have to say is that indeed, Mark will be immediately appointed to investigate Prison Gate.
Before we go, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the Honorable Mark Brantley, the leader of the Concerned Citizens Movement, for his sterling support to our political leader, the Honorable Sean Kenneth Richards, our next Prime Minister of this great federation. We know that the leadership of Honorable Sean Kenneth Richards is one that you can trust, one that you can depend on, and so that citizens and St. Kitts and Nevis know that their lives would be in great hands under his leadership. We don't want you to gamble with your future. In a few short weeks, the Honorable Sean Kenneth Richards would lead this great nation to better days. He would lead this great nation with a dynamic team, including your humble servant, Natasha Shani Gray Brooks. He would also lead this nation and the people of Central Bastille with Jonelle Powell, the Honorable Jonelle Powell, and I invite you to come forward, Honorable Jonelle Powell. He would also lead this great nation with the next representative for constituency number 3, the Honorable Kervin Milo Box Freeman. He would continue to lead this great nation under the astute leadership of the Honorable Lindsay Fitzpatrick Grant. We know in constituency number 5, it's our next Prime Minister. But next to him in constituency number 6, it will be the next parliamentary representative, the Honorable Troy A. Flanders. In constituency number 7, it is Lincoln David Pell, your next parliamentary representative. We don't want anyone else over in constituency number 7. And the deputy sheriff would be joining us on this dynamic team. The next parliamentary representative, Chesley O'Neill Hamilton. In Nevis 9, you know the sheriff is secure, and he will be your next parliamentary representative. He will be bringing along with him in Nevis 10, the Honorable Eric Evelyn. And so the final person to complete the puzzle would be the Honorable Alexis Jeffers. And here you have your dynamic team, the team that will be the future of St. Kitts and Nevis. 2 movements, the People's Action Movement, the Concerned Citizen Movement, 1 movement, 1 party, 1 movement, making sure that our country move upward, forward, and continue along the right path. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.